Hi guys, welcome. It's Kim Howerton. I am here. I am here with Kehoe bars. So the people that make these bars sent them to me. I've had like a tickle in my throat today, so sorry guys. Um, which is kind of hard to see from this, but it's Keho, Keho, Kehoe. And then there are these little bars here. I got one open. Looks like that. So you can see this one I took a little nibble off of, but just a teeny one. You can see the size of the bar. It's pretty much that. Um, this one was Tex-Mex flavored, and you can see, I mean, it's definitely looks that way, right? It's got pumpkin seed. It's a bunch of nuts, pumpkin seeds, pistachios, almonds, things like that, and then a lot of spices. The number one ingredient is soluble tapioca fiber, which, if you follow me, you know can be a little iffy or fine, and you can't know by reading the ingredient label. So I have a podcast on that with Ted Eiton, so you should look that one up. But they sent me these products, and hey guys, glad to have you here. Oh, when I lean forward, the light gets me. So I just thought I'd jump in with this, and I'll get to questions after we do these, but I wanted to show. So this one is savory. This one is Tex-Mex, the one that's open. This one is Thai. This one is curry, and then the one that I had with my boyfriend last night was pizza flavored. Now, the Tex-Mex one tastes Tex-Mex. It's spicy, gets a little tickle in the throat. I'm such a wimp. The one I had last night was supposed to taste like pizza. It was delicious, but it tasted like Thanksgiving stuffing. It tasted like Thanksgiving stuffing. That's what it tastes like. And I'm like, look, market that. People will eat that. Anyway, so I will read you the list of ingredients, though I have to squint because it's a little small. The first ingredient is on all of these is prebiotic soluble tapioca fiber. Well, I keep saying corn fiber. It's tapioca fiber. Same diff, really. It also has the issue where it comes in different grades, some of which act like sugar and some of which don't. This one, when I tried the bar last night, my blood sugar didn't do anything. I ate it with a meal, didn't expect it to do anything. Can't report for sure, but I give them the benefit of the doubt. Then a bunch of nuts, pecans, almonds, macadamias. This one just has pecans, almonds, macadamias, whereas other ones like the Tex-Mex has pumpkin seeds, so a bunch of different nuts. And then there's dehydrated bits of vegetables. So this one is onion flakes, cauliflower pearls, spinach, coconut flakes, coconut oil. Whereas like the other ones, it might be like the Tex-Mex one, it's corn, and then the one last night that was supposed to be pizza flavored but tastes like Thanksgiving stuffing for some reason, sun-dried tomatoes and olives. So it's basically soluble tapioca fiber, then it's a bunch of nuts, then it's dehydrated vegetables, and then it's spices, and that's pretty much what's in it. They're all savory. None of them have sweeteners. The texture, so you can see here, is very, you can see it's shiny. It's a little sticky. It's like exactly like a savory granola bar. The nutrition facts, 200 calories, 17 grams of fat, 15 grams total carbs, of which 11 are fiber and 5 grams of protein. They're all pretty similar. Like this one, the fat is 16 grams, this one's 17 grams, but they're all pretty similar. So here's the deal. Soluble tapioca fiber is all carbs. Now, whether those are digestible carbs or not is up for question. And nuts, lots of carbs. Again, some of those are not digestible by us. So, there are some, so depending on where you stand on the whole net carb situation. The reality for me is, I will say, of the ones I've tasted so far, they're delicious, very tasty. Again, pizza, don't expect pizza. It's not like pizza, doesn't taste like pizza to me at all, unless pizza to you tastes like stuffing. But it was this, I think it tastes, we were trying to describe it, Eric and I, last night as we were eating it, we're like, it's got that sort of like soft chewiness that we expect from stuffing, Anyway, Carrie says you need a cargo net for the nets. Carbs. Yeah, indeed. It is very high in total carbs for those of us that count total carbs. And I tend to say that's good. I'm what I often when I get products, I always want to give a really honest um review. So taste wise, yummy. They whole food. Here's the funky thing, right? With the exception of the first ingredient, all good ingredients, but that first ingredient is kind of an iffy one. Like I said, it could be good or it could not be good, and it's hard to know unless you know. So the the thing is, if I look at then the thing with products I next always look at is what hole will this fill in my life, right? Like there's got to be some place where something is lacking for me to buy something, right? Hopefully for you too. When I look at this is 200 calories, which is like not quite a meal, right? It's like, under what one would eat in a meal. So you could add it to a meal, but I don't snack. So it's not a snack. And it's these macros, for these macros, this would be a delightful salad. I could have, this is not, this is just for visual representation. I could have like this thing full of lettuce for 15 grams of carbohydrates, right? And so I would rather have a giant salad. So 15 grams of total carbs is a giant salad with lots of yummy stuff in it. And then 16, 17 grams of fat, some nice olive oil based dressing on that, and 5 or so grams of protein. I could throw a few nuts into my salad. So, just from a like, what does this fill in my life perspective, it's probably not something I would add in. I wasn't like, I'm really missing a savory granola bar experience. That being said, I love the idea that they're savory because not everything has to be sweet. And say if I had kids to feed, or I was going on a plane trip, or something where I needed some like compact food, maybe. So that's where I'm at with these. But they are very tasty. They're, and that's where I'm at. So Kehoe is the brand, and if you're interested, you should seek them out. Okay, let me go back and see. Hey Barbara, I see your question. All righty. Hold on one second. There we go. Had a weird thing I had to get rid of. Is it true if you eat strawberries and 3 apples every day, you can get, I think you mean rectal cancer? Or is it a myth? That is a myth. All right. I don't know what that's going on. Healthy and keto. Do I have a video of my tiramisu? I don't think I have a video of me making the tiramisu. I did make the tiramisu at Keto Fest for a demo, and that video might exist somewhere. But I'll take that under advisement. Basically, I will tell you in terms of making a tiramisu, and I explain this in the directions in my cookbook, which is it's like 3 or 4 steps, but each one of those steps is very easy. So it's like you have to make the zabaglione, like you have to make the custard, you have to whip the cream. So there are these things you have to do, but they're kind of like isolated things. And then you're just bringing them all together. So it seems really complicated, and there are a lot of steps, but you can break those into small chunks. Like there are certain parts of it you can just make a day in advance, and then you just have to assemble it. So it seems more complicated than it is. Sometimes I accidentally put things up on the screen. Hello. Barbara, I was recording some video. I don't know if it's going to work out or not, on Keto Chow. So strangely, I have some Keto Chow on the floor next to me. This flavor is good. Pumpkin spice caramel. Um, I had the little packets and they just sent me this big one. So this is Keto Chow. People want to know what it is. Keto Chow is um you should my desk is full of little things. This is not Keto Chow. This is Marigold whey protein powder. This is casein protein powder. So anyway, I can tell you a little bit about Keto Chow. One, the people that make Keto Chow are amazing people. It's a great company with like good hearts and they support the keto community and I love them. Okay. So in terms of Keto Chow as a product, Keto Chow is composed of something called milk protein isolate. So that means it's a combination of not these brands, right? But whey protein, which is visual aids, right? And casein protein. So casein protein and whey protein are the two types of milk proteins. So if you took a glass of milk and you isolated the proteins in that, you'd have 80% casein and 20% whey. Most protein powders you get on the market are whey. Whey is a lot more available because it's a byproduct of making cheese. So it's really cheap to get whey protein or to get the concentrate that you then make the isolate out of. So this is called a milk protein isolate. As an example, this is made from something. So like these drinks, Quest is this one's Quest, but Premier Protein, a lot of these kinds of little shaky drinkies, ready to drinks, they use often milk protein concentrate rather than milk protein isolate. Milk protein concentrate is one step earlier in the process. It often contains a little more lactose and just byproduct that you might not want. And milk protein concentrate is more inclined to give you a tummy ache than a milk protein isolate. If you don't do dairy at all, you probably don't want to do Keto Chow because it is dairy, but I do dairy. I love Keto Chow to bake with. I don't often drink shakes. I use them in recipes. I used to be kind of anti-shake. Now I'm okay with it. That being, or rather I should say, I'm still kind of anti-shake. Every once in a while, totally fine. Treat it like a dessert, treat it like a milkshake, totally fine. I don't think they are necessarily your best option nutritionally because it's isolated protein. Whereas when you eat whole real food, it's not isolated protein, it's whole real food that includes the vitamins and minerals that have been taken out to make a protein shake. That being said, Keto Chow adds them back in. So Keto Chow adds all those vitamins and minerals back in to their product. So I'm pro Keto Chow. Some people will quibble over the use of sucralose because almost all of their flavors use sucralose as a sweetener. I don't know how I feel about sucralose. Those of us that teach these things, I'm like, I don't know. I should not admit that, right? I know everything. I mean, that's just so dumb. Who knows everything? Nobody knows everything. I am not anti-sucralose these days. I think the reason is it's like there's so little in products. If you seem to have an insulin response to it, then pay attention to that. But mostly I'm not super concerned. Mostly I'm using Keto Chow or other protein powders in things I chew. I don't think you should drink your calories except in very specific circumstances. You got dental surgery or something. Like something like this, or like, any one of these kind of drink mixes you can get, like you can see, you find them in like drugstores and on road trips. They're better than a milkshake. But, are they perfect? No. But some of these powders, when you really start getting into the ingredients, are pretty good. Like if you look at some protein powders, they have a ton of stuff in them. But then other ones, like this one, is like whey isolate from grass-fed cows from Ireland, organic cocoa, organic vanilla, some L-glutamine, which is just, it's like a added vitamin, mineral, what the hell? It's an amino acid. That's what it is. Stevia, sunflower lecithin, which is just like an emulsifier, salt. A lot of these products have really minimal ingredients. I've also got, just because it's here, This is Ben Bickman. I want to call him Sam for some reason, but this is Ben Bickman, his company, Health Code, and this is another meal replacement. So this isn't just a whey protein or a protein powder; it's got fat in it. So this one is considered a meal complete meal is what it's called. So like whereas something like this is flavoring and protein powder, this is flavoring, protein powder, and fat added. And then there's, not an insignificant number of carbs in here from, the various powders and things that are added. So I'm also a supporter of this one, Health Code. But as an example, just getting my shoulder and things. This one you add your own fat to, so you can customize it. This one already has the fat added. So if you're like, no, I want less, no, I want more. Well, you could always do more, but you can't take it out. So that's an issue. So hopefully that answered some of your questions about protein powders today. You just caught me on a day they were right here. I skipped over something. Hey, Mike. I met the owner at Las Vegas Keto Show and bought 2 cases of them. I would eat them whenever I would eat nuts. They fill a gap. Or are you talking about the Kehoe product? Yeah, I met her too in San Diego, I think. And she seemed nice. She's vegan. So these are vegan. Yeah. So they are essentially like roasted flavored nuts in a lot of ways. Terry says, I need to make a digital recipe book with videos. I will get, I'm like, Terry, I have projects. I know, I totally do. Get me the camera crew. We'll set it up. Hey, Indonesia. Sylvia says, Keto Chow was great when I had some oral surgery. Totally. Gina says, you're looking fabulous. Are you still doing moderate fat these days? I am currently in a maintenance phase right now. I just finished up a shortcut, call it that, and lost a few more pounds. So that was exciting. It's a struggle because my neck, it's like it's hard to take your own medicine, right? So if you just diet, you get diminishing returns and you're just not as healthy. So really until spring, I'm planning to not try and lose body fat, instead try and gain some muscle mass and possibly not gain much weight. But you'll gain a little weight when you're trying to gain muscle mass, and that's just the way it goes. So thank you for saying I look fabulous. I am, though my fat is much lower than it used to be, but right now it's certainly higher than it was 3 weeks ago. So I can tell you, like, as an example, pull up my app. Hold on. One second. That's the wrong place. It's a new app I'm trying out. So right now, my protein is about 150 grams. My carbs are around 50 total. Remember, I am insulin sensitive and I eat more carbs, but that total amount of carbs includes erythritol, includes sweeteners, it's not net. So I just want to say, like, I used to eat closer to 20 grams of carbs. These days, I allow myself more vegetables than I used to. And so there's a higher number. And my fat's probably around 90 grams right now, maybe 90 to 100. So that's sort of where I'm at in terms of my macros right now. And then I'll be doing some reversing over the next few months so that hopefully I'll keep being able to eat a little bit more than that. That's sort of my baseline. It's probably around 1650 in terms of calories right now. So things are going well and I'm happy. And that certainly feels like a lot more food than I was eating a couple weeks ago, where my protein was about the same, my carbs were about the same, but my fat was pretty minimal. So there you go. Sometimes I'm like, is this more information than they want? Synergy says, I recently added Keto Chow as an easy meal to take to work. I wasn't getting enough protein with OMAD. I'm not willing to cook or pack meals. You do what you got to do. And you got to say, like, what is the best option to fill the gap here. And I would say doing Keto Chow for one of your meals, as opposed to not getting enough protein for the day. That's a win. If you're like if you're like it's Keto Chow or nothing, right? So I'm totally not against it. It's like, what is it replacing? If you were like, I'm gonna stop eating my chicken or steak at lunch and instead have a shake, I would say I don't know that that's an upgrade, but if it's, that or nothing, then it probably is. Absolutely. And I'm, like I said, totally pro using things that help you if you know how to use them properly. Um, One of the things I've been doing is I've been making something I call a protein frosty, or I have a recipe up on YouTube. It's literally just I use a food processor, but you use a blender if you have a better blender than I do. It's protein powder, a little bit of xanthan gum, and a lot of ice and a little bit of almond milk. You could use whatever liquidy, milky thing you want. Um, no one go anywhere crazy with that. And then it makes it like you eat it with a spoon, not a straw. And I find that much more filling. It's got more volume. Um, and so, like I said, I prefer things you have to eat with a spoon or a fork or chew than things that you can drink with a straw, because unless you're somebody who's like, I'm so full all the time, I'm like, I can barely eat 600 calories and I need a way to get, and then I would say, well, have a shake because they're not super filling. So, it just depends on your circumstance. Um, the Well-Fed Human says, when will my book come out? Dr. Barry and I are talking about that right now. Well, I will have an update for you in the future. Livia says, I got a couple samples of Health Code protein powder and both servings gave me a massive stomachache. Oh, funny. What's funny is blah, 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 the what's it called? The Health Code has digestive enzymes in it. Like, they added enzymes to help it digest better. So interesting. But I have my iced coffee. Livia, do other protein powders give you stomach aches? Curious. Terry said, oh, now I'm gonna sneeze. Maybe not. Maybe not. When there's a sneeze in your nose. Okay. Terry says I'm at 1,600 calories, 156 protein, 102 fat, which ends up as 57 fat, 38% protein. Is that high, low, or moderate fat? I don't know much about the ratio thing. Okay, so it's subjective is the answer. I would say, like, I compared to a lot of keto people, kind of who are very traditional keto in a way. Not that I'm not a keto person, but compared to how I was 4 years ago or even 3 years ago, I would say I'm much higher carb now. I'm over double the amount of carb tolerance that I used to let myself have in my diet. I'm certainly not a high carb eater. It's all relative, I would say. I think anything above 35% protein in terms of calories, I would call higher protein. But again, it's just subjective. I think anything sort of when you top out at 35% protein is sort of where I would say is higher protein, probably 30 to 35%. But again, we all just you're just picking a place to draw a line. So yeah. But so if your protein is about 35, like on average 35% of your calories, that if it's like 65-35, that is about a 1-to-1 ratio within a couple of grams. So that is that's a line I would say a lot of people use when your fat grams start to be under your protein grams. You'd definitely call that higher protein, low carb. I think so. I think that's what I'd say. Define your own terms, people. Chrissy says, have I tried the high key marshmallow treats? I have not. I saw them. I was like, oh, I should try those, but I have not. I just had that thought. Synergy says, thanks. It was not an easy decision to add a shake. I do agree real food is best, but I'm a lazy cook, and probably the best thing about OMAD as I was eating only one small meal. I like the frosty idea. Yeah, the only problem with the frosty is it doesn't travel real well. You have to kind of eat it right away, but it's a fabulous. So, on those nights when you are like, I want a giant, giant bowl of ice cream. I mean, let's get real. You can just add a ton of ice to that, and you add sweetener and all sorts of stuff, and you could fill your entire food processor with this protein frosty. It literally, like this much. I mean, don't not that much powder, but like by the time it when you let it process, it fluffs a lot of air into it. That's why it's like a frosty, like a soft serve almost, not like dense ice cream. There's so much air in it, but it's giant. So you can take lots of spoonfuls, and there are just times when you want to eat volume. And on those times, the protein frosty is a great idea. Now, I just use when I make my protein frosty, um, I will either use Keto Chow, which has both the whey and the casein, or I will use a whey protein powder. Well, what have I done a lot is I've used the Prime Equip, this is beef protein isolate. And then I don't use this one, but I use a similar one. I'll use a little bit of casein protein, because casein gets really thick, so it helps the texture. So the recipe is on the YouTube channel, so you can look for it. It's protein frosty. But something like a Keto Chow, if you have that, you can use it. And so I made one of the eggnog Keto Chow the other day, and that was very tasty. So yeah, I would say if and the downside is very small, right? Because if you use hold on. I don't have a very big desk, so things are on the floor too. Like a serving of this Keto Chow is only 126 calories. It's got a half a gram of fat and 26 grams of protein. It's got 7.7 grams of total carbs because of the added vitamins and minerals. And there's some acacia gum in here, which will help with thickness as well. So, it's like how many times can you eat a container of ice cream bigger than your head, depending on how big your hair is, for, what, by the time you add some almond milk in there, it's going to be super minimal in terms of caloric intake. But if you want it to be a little more filling, and you could use a little bit of cream in addition to almond milk or something like that. So there are times when you want a big thing, and this is a way that you can have that. Okay. Terry said, I hear 1-to-1 and 2-to-1, no clue what they mean. Okay, so Terry, it just means, so when people talk about 1-to-1 and 2-to-1, they're talking about grams. So I think it was you said above, you eat 156 grams of protein and 102 grams of fat. So if you ate 156 grams of protein and 156 grams of fat, you'd be eating 1-to-1. If you ate, I'm going to lower the number so it's easier. So if you ate 204 grams of protein, but 102 grams of fat, that would be 2-to-1. But if you did the opposite, right, that could go either way. So you have to give the context. So fat to protein, you'd say, then the first, if you say, what's your fat to protein? Fat is the first number you list, protein's the second. Or if you said protein to fat, the opposite. So that makes sense. So 1-to-1 just means the gram number is the same. For every 1 gram of protein, you have 1 gram of fat. What 2-to-1 means is for every 2 grams, you have 1 gram. So 2-to-1 protein to fat, you have 2 grams of protein for 1 gram of fat. 2-to-1 fat to protein, you have 2 grams of fat for 1 gram of protein. So they're just ratios. They're just ratios. We have these straws at home, little green spots on them. I love a good straw, and I hate paper straws. So we have our own straws because a lot of places around here only use paper straws now. Hate that feeling in my mouth. Sarah says, what's the best way to ignore hunger pains during fasting? I'm day 3 of a 23-1 intermittent fast, but there are sometimes during the day that the hunger pains are real. Okay, I'm not a super good faster. I don't do long fasts, so I might not be the best option here. But I would say make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Some people I hear they pop a little salt in their mouth when they feel hungry, and that can help distract them. And then get away from the kitchen. Go out and do something. Go for a walk. Like not a hard walk, but just walk around the block. Like change your perspective, change your surroundings. That can help, like just change the brain, the mindset. Livia says, the only other protein powder that has given me a stomach ache was soy protein powder, but I have the same reaction to soy milk. Nothing like a health code, though. It was awful. Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. I'm glad it was a sample. I'm sure they would have given your money back, though. Christy says, what's casein powder? Okay. So I don't know why I feel I'm like, it's like a kindergarten teacher. I feel like I need visual aids. So this is casein. The workers gonna be like, why is there powder all over the carpet? Why are these the little container, the little thingies, they're always buried and I have powder. So I don't it doesn't really look that different than whey protein powder, right? It's kind of sticking to the side of the hand is covered in white powder. Okay. So that is casein protein powder. Hold on, rubbing it on the pants, rubbing it on the pants. It feels a little stickier and thicker, but it's just a powder, so it's dry. This is whey protein powder. This one's chocolate, so it's going to be brown because it's got cocoa in it. This is whey protein powder. You can see it did not stick to my hand or the outside of the container. Drier. So here's the thing. If I so what is casein powder? Covered in powder. Casein powder versus whey powder. They're both protein powders. So if you had a glass of milk, not milk, but if you had if this was a glass of milk, you were like, what's the protein content? There would be two types of proteins in it. Casein would be 80% casein protein and 20% whey protein. So cottage cheese and Greek yogurt, very, very high in casein protein. It's just not a protein powder. It's not isolated. Cheese, exceedingly high in casein protein because in the cheese making process, they drain the whey out. So what we think of a lot as high fat dairy is very high in casein. It's just casein is a type of protein. The way our body responds to whey versus casein is very, very different because of how they're digested. Whey protein is digested super fast, which means it can be very useful for things like muscle protein synthesis because it's very, very hot. So you guys know about amino acids. So we eat protein, right? Protein, it's a mix of amino acids. Our body breaks those amino acids apart and then we digest them. So so every type of protein is some different combination of amino acids. And whey protein is very, very high in leucine, and leucine is the amino acid of most concern for muscle protein synthesis. And because of that, it's very helpful for muscle building. But whey protein is digested super, super fast. And because of that, or in part because of that, it has more of an insulin response. Casein protein, it is it gets thick when it's mixed with liquid, when it's digested, right? Because it gets mixed with more liquid, it thickens. So if you put some casein protein in a cup and you add some almond milk to it or water and you start stirring, it'll turn into pudding. Like it gets thick, like cementy. And bodybuilders make something called casein pudding with that. If you added the same amount of liquid to whey protein, it wouldn't thicken up. It would a little, but not so much. And so they have a different reaction in the body. Casein protein, because of that tendency to thicken, it digests very slowly. And so you're exposed to that protein for longer. It does not have as extreme a response in terms of your insulin response. Am I that concerned about insulin response in the formulation of a whole meal? Not really. Ben Bickman's product has whey protein in it, and he's an insulin researcher. We talked about it. He said not a concern inside a meal, but you wouldn't necessarily want to sip on a little protein drink all day long slowly that has whey in it, because then you're just like insulin, 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 insulin. Hopefully that explains something. Um, okay. Thanks, Kevin. Are they interchangeable, whey and casein? No. I hopefully I just explained that. But as I said, in a product, wow, wrong bag. In a product like Keto Chow, this has milk protein isolate, which is 80% whey. No, backwards. 80% casein and 20% whey. So there are products that they're already combined in. Aaron said, so one thing that's really cool, and my boyfriend is like, why do we have 20,000 different protein powders in our cabinet right now? Years ago it was sweeteners, now it's protein powders. I used casein to make the most fabulous pancakes the other day. One of the things is if you cook with whey protein, it dries out. It's not the moistest thing. The casein made a much better texture. So if you're using these things for baking, they're different. They have different effects. I don't know. What else? Aaron says, since we're talking about dairy, any thoughts on A2 milk? Is it keto friendly? A2 versus A1. So these are classifications of dairy. Don't know the exact term for it, but generally speaking, people find A2 much easier to digest. Most of the cow dairy we get in the United States is A1 dairy, and A1 is a classification of I think it's classification specifically of the protein within it, that is not as easily digested for some of us. Now, goat, so goat cheese, goat milk, sheep, and what's the other one? Feta. Goat and sheep. Goat and sheep are always A2. Dairy in the United States is usually A1, but in Europe, it's often A2. It's just different types of cows. But in the United States, there is a dairy called, I think it's called Alexander. And Alexander dairy, the Alexander milk is all A2. Now, a funny thing that I learned though is that I saw they had A2 cream. And the funny thing is, with A2 versus A1, in terms of like heavy cream, it doesn't really matter because the protein is basically strained out of cream. Really, like butter and cream, like when it's very, very high fat, you're getting so little of the proteins in it that it doesn't really matter. Anyway, but if you're a dairy that only keeps these kinds of cows, that makes sense that, you're just labeling all your products as being from A2 sources, but it's not as important in butter, and it's not as important as in butter and cream and things like that as it is in milk. I do not believe that all A2 is lactose free, but it may be that a A2 dairy makes their product lactose free. But generally speaking, I'm not a dairy expert, so I could be wrong, but it doesn't make sense to me. Terry asked, could you use casein to thicken when you cook? I wouldn't. I mean, if you were making like a soup like that was dairy based, you could probably do it. I've never seen unflavored casein though. It probably exists. But that might be an issue. I would stick to the glucomannan. Chelsea says, can you do the BBBE, beef, butter, bacon, egg challenge for 6 months? No reason you couldn't, in my opinion. Deb says, I love casein. I still feel a lot longer. I make a pudding. Yeah, casein is not super fun to drink. but it's great for making pudding with. Generally speaking, it needs something added to it, like some fruit or nuts or something. But some people are really anti casein because they're like, use whey, don't use casein because casein is super addictive, right? So they found, that the properties of cheese. They've done studies around cheese, and cheese is very high in casein, and that like addictive quality of cheese. I'm gonna say I have yet to meet a person that is super addicted to pure casein powder. So, your results may vary. But if you're dairy intolerant, don't use whey or casein protein. One thing I will say is if you go for the isolate, so this one says grass-fed micellular casein. So when micellular is even more broken down than isolate, apparently. So make sure it says isolate, not concentrate. In those versions, the lactose is basically out of them. So people who are lactose intolerant are generally, please do not take this as personal advice, generally tolerate protein powders, the isolates, because it's the isolated protein. That being said, a lot of people are sensitive to dairy proteins. And if you're sensitive to dairy proteins are a bad idea. So you got to take those things into account. There you go. But Amy, you asked about lactose intolerance. So I would say if it's just a mild intolerance, from the people that I know that say they cannot drink milk, causes them major upset, they do great with the isolates. But it all exists on a spectrum. So if it's pretty strong, I would proceed with caution. Certainly a true allergy, don't even proceed. So much caution, you go nowhere. Chelsea said, what did I say you could add as thickeners? I would, my favorite thickener for most things is konjac, Konjac, or Glucomannan. They're the same thing. Is a great thickener. Generally speaking, what you do is you just cook whatever you're trying to cook, get it hot, and then sprinkle just a teeny bit over the surface and then incorporate it in. Check, has it thickened up the way? Let it heat for another 5 minutes or so. Has it thickened the way I want it to? Heat a little more. Just go in very small doses or else it will be disgusting. Xanthan gum is also a thickener, but it gets slimy faster. So I like konjac, not cognac, konjac better. Which you can get on Amazon in a little container. It'll last you forever. Helene says, is it okay to do low carb keto, 30 carbs and lower, and then some days have almost no carbs? Sure. Christy says, in a single serve brownie recipe, could I use whey instead of a scoop of casein? They're gonna react differently. So Christy, if you found a recipe for a brownie that says to use casein, if you sub whey instead of casein, generally speaking, what you'll find is that the brownie is gonna be drier, like the Sahara. Casein keeps more moisture as you cook with it. So generally speaking, whey is very challenging to bake with, but in certain circumstances works fine, especially if that baked good has like egg yolks and a lot of fat in it to balance the dryness of the whey. But they just have very different textures. And so you're going to get a very different effect. That's simply from a food chemistry point of view. Nutritionally is a separate topic. Luba, what do I think about egg fast to break a stall? I would say that I'm going to need a sip of iced coffee before I answer that. Okay, let's go. So I used to be very anti-egg fast. I'm still fairly anti-egg fast. The reason I'm not super into it is we think of them as kind of like some magic. The reality is they're just very calorically restricted. And because you're eating a very limited palette of food, right? You can only have, I think, eggs and cheese and butter, something like that. I feel like what happens is there's this issue when we eat a very limited palette of food, we get more tired of that food. So it encourages us to undereat a bit. And eggs have fabulous nutrition. I'm very pro egg. Um, but they are not the amount of eggs you have to eat to get enough protein is quite a bit. So like the traditional egg fast is going to be, I think it's like 8 eggs for the day. And then to that, you're adding a couple ounces of cheese, or cream cheese and butter. And 8 eggs is what? 8 times 7 is 42. But it's like you're getting like 50 grams of protein for the day out of 8 eggs. Maybe it's more than that, but still I mean, maybe it's more eggs than 8, but it's a fairly low protein, high-ish fat, low calorie approach. And generally speaking, I don't think it's the best formulation of your diet. I'd rather learn why you're stalled, right? So I'd rather understand why you're stalled, which I know sounds kind of dumb. Oh, thanks, Terry. Yes, like and subscribe, people. Like and subscribe. Um, uh, yeah, I would rather know why you're stalled. What's going on? What have you been eating? Have you been on track and just not seeing weight loss? And then fixing that, rather than just trying to, it's not like you're stuck. It's not like, we need to smack you like you're a stuck appliance. Like it's better to know what's broken so we can fix it. But, if an egg fast gets you on track and rolling in the right direction and you enjoy it, like you have my blessing. I just don't necessarily ever prescribe them to my clients. I want to know what's wrong. Why aren't we seeing fat loss? What's going on there, and how can we fix the underlying issue, so that we'll see more of what we want in an ongoing basis. That might have been, again, too long an answer, but we'll see. Peggy says, what do I think of Zip Fizz? I think there are better products. I prefer Element, LMNT. Remember from my uh, sign language days. L, is that right? No, LMNT. Element. Drink Element is their website. That's a much better electrolyte beverage. And then the second one I love is Redmond's Relight. Those are the two electrolyte beverages I recommend. Redmond's Relight and Element, both great because they're very high in sodium. And when you need an electrolyte beverage, primarily you need sodium. So not a big fan of Zip Fizz in terms of, I think it's got some not optimal ingredients. But if you don't feel well and you're in the vicinity of some Zip Fizz and you're not in the vicinity of something better, I would say that might be the best option. So, it's just a question of, well, what do you have available to you, and is that the best thing you could do? I have a drawer full of Element and Redmond's Relight, and if my boyfriend doesn't steal them all when he goes hiking, then I always have those for me. And I have them in my purse and I carry them around with me. 5.5 years keto, I still carry electrolyte beverages with me. They only take up, they're like, they're only like, that's not a good example. They're only as big as I don't know. I don't have a good example. They're like they're like the quarter the size of my phone. They're very teeny. They're like my finger. Very easy to cart around with me. Missy MC says, aren't egg whites an inflammatory food for some people? So like similar to dairy, eggs are not dairy, people. Eggs are not dairy, but similar to dairy, the protein in eggs for some people is indeed inflammatory because people are sensitive to the protein in eggs. I would say equally as often, if not maybe a quarter, somewhere. A substantial amount of people are sensitive to the proteins in eggs. Thank you, Terry. I was like, I don't know which finger they're like. And so some people have an inflammatory response, and more people are sensitive to whites than yolks. Most people are fine with yolks, although some people aren't. But more people respond poorly to the whites. And so, yeah, so they are inflammatory if you have an issue. They're not inflammatory for everyone. Put it that way. The well-fed human says Zip Fig spikes me like sugar. Yeah, it actually has, I believe, sugar in it. So not the best option for a lot of us. Let's see. I showed you the Kehoe when I was like, what was on my agenda for tonight? Did I cover everything? I think it's so important to keep with you whatever you might need for the day. I keep Redmond's, like a little shaker of Redmond salt in my purse and some electrolytes in my purse, and I'm always good with that. Um, just a funny story. I don't know why I feel the need to tell you, but this is my Aura ring, right? It's a tracker and all that kind of stuff. And I'm gonna upgrade to a new one. And so, but this one still worked. So I said to my boyfriend, I was like, will this fit on your pinky? I mean, I feel like I'm trying not to flip anyone off. I feel like my ring finger, this is my ring finger, is not super small. I was like, this should fit on your pinky. I will have you know, I'm a little taller than my boyfriend. It's not like he's, 6'5" or anything. So I was like, this should fit on your pinky. Could not even get the ring. It was like it was like getting to the knuckle, and it was like, mm-mm. I was shocked. I also was a little. I was also found slightly attractive. He has some nice hands, but I was. But what's funny is my hands. All you were like, why are you telling us? My hands are as long as his. So that's why I was like, oh, my ring will totally fit you. Did not even begin to fit him. Anyway, people are made in different shapes. That was Kim's lesson this week. Anyway, Lydia says, how can you tell if you're egg sensitive? Um, if when you eat eggs, you feel terrible. That's the best example. Or you get a rash, or you just have unfortunate, you feel bloated, swollen, you have a physical response. Um, one thing I will say, there are a lot of people out there that will tell you that you should get IgE or food sensitivity testing to find out. Nah, it's not worth it. It's not helpful. It gives a lot of false positives. The science is pretty poor on those things. If you really want to know if you're egg sensitive, take them out of your diet for 30 days and leave everything else the same. So eggs are the only variable that's changing, and then add them back into your diet and don't change anything else either, and see how you felt without the eggs and how you feel with the eggs. That's the best way to do it. And you can, if you want to test them separately, you can separate yolk, like first bring back yolks. How's that work? Then add whites, so you can do that in separate steps. Anyway, yeah, Peggy says someone mentions it fits to them. Yeah, it's popular, I know, but not something I tend to use. Um, Joy says you can use less fat in health code. It calls for 2 scoops and I use 1 scoop. Yeah, that will give you less fat, but will also give you less protein. So you could potentially, if you wanted to, take 1 scoop of the health code and then add a scoop of a different protein powder to it to balance it. But in terms, I can't change the ratio in here is what I mean. So yeah, if I wanted just less total fat, I could use 1 scoop instead of 2 scoops, but then the protein goes down to 13.5 grams, which is certainly not enough for a meal. But I do see you say then I'll have I will have, you understand that because you say, I then have a chicken breast for dinner. Totally. Yeah. So just, it's all a balancing act about what macros you want to get over the whole course of the day. All right, people, we're going to wrap it up here in a minute. Sorry for my weird thoughts about ring sizes. I don't know where that came from, but I looked down and I saw my ring and then I thought about it. It's part of my charm. Anywho, any last questions before we wrap it up for the day, evening, whatever? Speaking of chicken breast, I think I have some calling my name to cook for dinner. Funny thing, just speaking about my boyfriend some more. I can eat a steak every single night. Every night. But he gets tired of steak all the time. So we had some chicken in the freezer, and I was like, "Do you want steak or chicken tomorrow?" And he's like, "Chicken." So, so we'll be doing that tonight for dinner. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Okay. Thanks, Angie. I'm always end these things, and I'm like, "What did I say?" Anyway, keeping it real for sure. All right, guys. I oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, my mom saw it and she loves Joy. She's like, "Ooh, what is that?" I was like, "It is a fitness tracker, Mom." Anyway, I hope you all have a fabulous week. And I will see you next. Bye.